It was supposed to be a routine coffee stop, the kind Oliver Grant made every morning before facing courtrooms, mergers, and cutthroat negotiations. His polished shoes clicked against the sidewalk, briefcase in hand, mind already pacing through. His first client meeting. But the moment he stepped inside the Honeybean Cafe, time stuttered. The scent of cinnamon and fresh espresso was familiar, but what froze him wasn't the ambiance. It was her. Behind the counter, pouring a latte, with practiced precision, stood Grace Delaney, the woman he had once imagined building a life with. And beside her, handing napkins to a customer, was a girl who looked hauntingly familiar, a smaller version of himself. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Oliver's breath caught, his body frozen mid-step. The cafe chatter faded to static as his eyes locked on the child, maybe 8 or 9, curly chestnut hair tied into a messy ponytail, eyes the exact shade of his own, with a dimple that deepened as she smiled politely. Something primal stirred inside him. Disbelief, confusion, and a pang of something he hadn't felt in years. Regret. Grace didn't see him at first. She was focused on the espresso machine, sleeve rolled up to the elbow, her auburn hair pulled back in a low knot. Her voice, when she finally turned and called an order, was older than he remembered, richer, a little tired. Then her eyes met his. For one agonizing moment, nothing else existed. Her smile vanished. Her hand dropped the towel it had been holding. Oliver watched the color drain from her face, watched her shoulders stiffen as if bracing for impact. He took a step forward, compelled beyond reason. "Grace!" His voice cracked slightly, a sound he barely recognized in himself. She blinked fast, like she was forcing herself to wake from a dream. "Oliver," she said, her voice low and flat. The girl, the one who had his eyes, looked between them with confusion. "Mom!" she asked. That single word snapped Grace out of her trance. She stepped out from behind the counter, put a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. "You need to leave," Grace whispered to him, just loud enough to be heard over the clink of dishes. "Now is not the time." But Oliver couldn't move. "Who is she?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Grace's jaw tightened. "You need to go," she repeated, eyes blazing. "Please don't do this here." Oliver stepped back, heart pounding, years of compartmentalized emotion flooding his chest. He turned and left the cafe without another word. But as he stood outside, the cold morning air hitting his face, he pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. She hadn't changed her name. That girl. She had to be his daughter. Back inside, Grace guided her daughter, Lily, to the kitchen in the back. Her hands trembled as she poured herself a glass of water. "Was that someone you knew?" Lily asked cautiously. Grace forced a smile, trying to steady herself. "Just an old acquaintance," she said. "Someone from before you were born." But Lily wasn't buying it. "He looked at me weird," she said, "like he knew me." Grace crouched beside her, brushed a loose curl behind her ear. "People see what they want to see," she murmured, but her heart thudded like a war drum. Oliver sat in his parked car for nearly an hour, staring at the photo he had found online years ago. The last picture of them together, blurry and poorly lit at a college bonfire. Back then, he was just a law student with a chip on his shoulder, and dreams bigger than his bank account. Grace had been the calm to his storm, an artist studying education, endlessly curious and warm. He remembered the way she laughed, unguarded and unapologetically full. That laugh was long gone now. He tried to piece together the years. She had disappeared right after his father's funeral. He'd assumed she left because he wasn't ready, because he had become someone else. His mother, Margaret, had told him Grace had moved on, that she had dropped out, that she didn't want a life tied to the Grant name or the obligations that came with it. But now he wasn't so sure. Back at home, Grace sat on the edge of her bed, the walls closing in. She stared at a photo on her nightstand, Lily at 4, in pigtails, grinning through missing front teeth. Her fingers clenched the bedspread. She had spent years building this quiet life, small, safe, uncomplicated. She never expected Oliver Grant to walk back into it, especially not like this. That night, Oliver couldn't sleep. The image of Lily's face haunted him, not just the resemblance, but the way she tilted her head, the cadence of her voice. There were too many coincidences, and he needed answers, real answers. He typed Grace's name into a background search, heart pounding. The result hit him like a freight train. Grace Delaney, never married, 1 child, no father listed. It wasn't enough. He had to see her again, not in public, not where they had to pretend. He needed the truth, every aching second of it. 2 days passed before he saw her again. Oliver had camped out in his mind, pacing imaginary courtrooms of what-ifs and could-have-beens. The impulse to text her came and went like a fever. Instead, he waited for the right time. Waited until he felt like he could speak without anger or confusion strangling him. When he walked into the Honey Bean Cafe again, it was just after the lunch rush. The place was quieter now. Grace was at the counter, rearranging a pastry display. She saw him instantly and didn't flinch this time, but her eyes told him exactly what she was thinking. "You really shouldn't be here," she said, not looking up from the croissants. "I need 10 minutes, he replied, voice steady. "Just 10 minutes. Then I'll leave and never bother you again. Promise." Grace sighed and gave a sharp nod toward the door behind the counter. "5, she said, "and I swear, if you upset her—" "I won't," he cut in. "This is just between us." They stepped into the small back office, barely big enough for the desk, and filing cabinet inside. She closed the door gently behind them. The silence was thick. "I didn't know," he began, voice low. "About her. About any of it." Grace folded her arms. "And if you had?" she asked, tone flat. "Would you have traded your suits and mergers for a baby and a 2-bedroom apartment?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "God, yes! You think I wouldn't have shown up? You think I wouldn't have tried?" "I did try," she snapped, voice cracking. "I called you. I wrote. I even went to your house, Oliver. Your mother answered the door in a cashmere robe and told me you'd moved on, that I was a mistake." He staggered backward slightly as if the words had winded him. "She told me you left," he whispered. "That you dropped out, said you needed a clean break, that you didn't want anything tying you down." Grace let out a hollow laugh. "Of course she did." They stared at each other, the gap between them widening and narrowing in every breath. "I need to know about her," he said. "About Lily. What's she like? What's her favorite food? Does she read like you, or does she argue like me?" His voice was barely holding together. Grace looked away. "She's brilliant," she said. "She loves books and science and old documentaries. She thinks facts are more important than feelings, but she still cries at animal rescue videos. She's kind and careful, and she's got your goddamn stubborn jaw." Oliver closed his eyes for a second, just to catch the swell of emotion rising in his chest. "Grace, I want to meet her." "You already did." "I mean for real. I want to talk to her, know her, be something." "You don't just get to show up and claim a title because of biology," she said sharply. "You weren't there when she had pneumonia and I slept on a hospital bench for 2 nights. You weren't there for science fairs and spelling bees and nightmares." "I know," he said, "and I will never be able to erase that. But I'm here now." Grace didn't answer. The pain on her face was too old to untangle in a 5-minute conversation. He stepped closer, but not too close. "You never told her about me." "She knows." "Enough," Grace said, "that I loved someone, that he didn't stay. I never painted you as a villain, Oliver. I wanted to protect her." He nodded slowly, absorbing every syllable. "I get that. I do. But I'm not walking away, not again. I want to know her. I want to earn my way in, whatever that takes. Grace's jaw tensed. It's not that simple. No, he said, but it's that important. A knock at the door startled them both. A young barista poked her head in. Grace, Lily's here. School let out early. Grace blinked. Thanks, Joe. As the girl ducked out, Oliver looked at Grace one last time. Let me see her. Even just to say hi. I'll leave the rest up to you. Grace hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, she nodded. 5 minutes, out there, no question she doesn't ask first. Oliver exhaled. Understood. Lily was seated at her usual corner table, a tangle of school books and colored pens spread out before her. Her legs swung beneath the chair as she chewed the end of a pencil, brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't notice Oliver approaching. At first, Grace stood behind him, arms folded tightly, watching her daughter with a wary eye. Lily, she said gently, this is Mr. Grant. He's an old friend. Lily glanced up, eyes sharp and evaluating. Hi, she said, polite but guarded. She was at the age where manners met intuition, and her expression said she didn't trust strangers just because adults said to. Oliver smiled softly, not wanting to overwhelm her. Hey there. Nice to meet you, Lily. I heard you're into science. Her eyes lit up slightly, just enough to betray her interest. I guess, she said, hedging. I'm working on a project about wind energy. Mum says I talk about it too much. I doubt that, he replied, kneeling beside the table to match her eye level. Wind energy's pretty fascinating. You know, there's a turbine model with vertical blades that works better in cities. Lily tilted her head. Most people don't know that, Oliver shrugged. I used to study engineering before law, still kind of a geek for that stuff. For a moment, the guarded wall cracked. What kind of law? She asked, curiosity taking hold. Corporate mostly, he said. I help businesses solve problems. Sometimes I wish I had stuck with science. She nodded, then frowned. So you like math? Always, he said with a grin. Used to stay up way too late solving equations for fun. Don't tell anyone, though. Might ruin my reputation. That made her smile. Small, but real. Grace, watching from a few feet away, saw the resemblance again. This time not just in looks, but in rhythm. The way they tilted their heads the same way when they listened. The soft frown when they were concentrating. It was like watching a reflection she hadn't noticed until now. Do you live around here? Lily asked. Not far, Oliver replied, carefully. I used to live closer, a long time ago. I didn't know your mom was still in town. Grace cleared her throat, and the moment shifted. Lily glanced at her, then back at Oliver, a quiet suspicion returning to her eyes. You look kind of familiar, she said suddenly. Oliver froze, uncertain how to respond. Grace stepped in. That's probably because he's been on TV, she said lightly. Lawyers like him show up in the news sometimes. Lily narrowed her eyes but let it go. I guess. Oliver stood. I should go. Just wanted to say hi and maybe talk science someday, if that's cool. Lily nodded slowly. Okay. Bye, Mr. Grant. He paused, then added, Call me Oliver, or whatever you want. She watched him go with an expression Grace couldn't quite read. Back in the cafe office, Grace confronted him. She's smart. She'll figure it out. I'm counting on it, he replied. I want her to. I want her to ask questions, because then I get to answer them with truth. Grace didn't respond for a long time. Her guard was slipping, just slightly, but her heart was still wrapped in too many layers of fear. She had raised Lily alone. She had carried the weight. She couldn't just let him walk in and change everything. I need time, she said finally. This can't move fast. Oliver nodded. I'll be here, however long it takes. That night. Lily stared out her bedroom window, clutching the wind turbine blueprint she'd been sketching. She didn't understand everything, but something about that man had felt familiar. in a way she couldn't explain. The way he spoke, the way he listened, and that crease in his brow when he concentrated, it looked exactly like hers. Oliver sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the Nashville skyline, but tonight the view meant nothing. He hadn't slept. Well, since seeing Lily, or rather since recognizing her, that dimple, that unmistakable twitch in her smile when she was about to challenge an idea. Every memory of Grace was now colored by the knowledge that she hadn't walked away from him. She'd been pushed out. He poured himself a whiskey, sat down, and pulled out his old phone, the one he'd kept in a drawer like a time capsule. It hadn't worked in years, but he had never thrown it away. Part nostalgia, part guilt, he charged it and powered it on. The screen flickered like an old light bulb before finally stabilizing. Messages from 10 years ago began to appear, all unread. Most were junk. But he remembered clearly, back then, after his father died, he had given the device to his mother to handle everything. Emails, calls, scheduling. She said he needed space to grieve and focus. And then she told him Grace had left. But as he scrolled through the logs, something tugged at him. There were no calls from Grace, no messages, no voicemails, nothing. And that was strange, because he remembered feeling confused that she hadn't reached out. He had even asked. His mother had looked him in the eyes and said, "Some people don't stick around for the hard parts, sweetheart." His chest tightened. It didn't make sense. He needed more. So he called someone who might know. "Thomas," he said when the older man picked up, "I need a favor." "Of course, Mr. Grant. I need you to check something for me. Back in the fall of 2013, did Grace Delaney ever come to the house? Do you remember?" A pause on the line. There was a long, slow inhale. "I do." Oliver sat up straighter. "You do?" "She came 3 times, sir, once in October, again in December, and one last time in late February. I remember because the weather was awful. She was visibly pregnant the second visit. Your mother instructed us not to let her pass the gate." His stomach dropped. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was just the driver," Thomas said, guilt lacing his voice. "I didn't know the full story. And your mother was, well, she made it clear. She said you were grieving, fragile, that it was best to move on." Oliver rubbed his temple, heart pounding. "Did she say anything else?" "She said if Grace came again, we were to escort her off the property, no exceptions." Oliver stood, the room spinning. "Thank you, Thomas." When he hung up, the silence in the room felt deafening. A decade of lies had just cracked open at his feet. He paced, then sat, then stood again, consumed by rage and grief. His mother hadn't just misled him, she had stolen from him. 10 years of his daughter's life, first steps, first words, school plays, bedtime stories, gone. He pulled up his calendar. He needed to confront her, but he also needed proof, something concrete. He called a tech consultant he trusted and requested a digital recovery on his old email servers and phone records. If Grace had written, if she had called, he wanted every trace. By morning, the tech had recovered dozens of flagged messages, all from the same address, Grace Delaney 89 Gmail, all filtered, blocked and marked as spam on the server, not by accident, but through custom filters. It wasn't technical error, it was sabotage. He stared at the inbox. One subject line read, "Please call me, it's important." Another said, "I need you to know what's happening." He felt sick. At 9:02 a.m. he drove to the Grant estate. Margaret was in the garden, sipping from a porcelain cup, immaculate in her pearl earrings and navy blue silk robe. "Darling," she said, setting the teacup down, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "I need to ask you something," Oliver said, voice low, controlled. "And I need you to be very careful with how you answer." She tilted her head. "Of course. Did Grace come here after I left for New York?" After Dad's funeral? Margaret blinked once. No. He stared at her. You're sure? Quite. He exhaled slowly, pulled a single printed email from his coat and dropped it on the table. Then how do you explain this? Margaret's face didn't move. Not at first, but her eyes flicked to the page, and for a fraction of a second, something cracked in her polished facade. I see, she said finally. So you've been digging. I needed the truth, he said, because I found a girl this week. She's 9. She has my eyes, my brain, and she's the best thing I never got to know. She would have ruined your life, Margaret snapped, suddenly defensive. You were on the brink of everything, power, success. You were vulnerable. I was in love, Oliver said. I had a right to make my own choices. Not then, she spat. Not when everything your father built was hanging by a thread. You think you'd be where you are now if she had tied you down with a child. Oliver stepped back, disgusted. She didn't tie me down. You locked her out. He turned to leave. You'll never have a relationship with her, or with Lily. Not after this. Her voice trembled. You'd throw away your family name over... I'm not throwing anything away, he said, already walking. I'm building something real, something you'll never understand. Grace was slicing strawberries for a tart when Lily spoke, not with suspicion, but something heavier, like truth pressing against the edges of her small voice. Mom, she said, was that man from the cafe? Someone important? The knife stilled mid-air. Grace didn't look up. Her hands kept moving, slower now, mechanical. Why do you ask? Lily shrugged, but her tone was too careful. He knew about turbines, and he knew my name, and you got really quiet when he left. Grace turned, leaning on the counter, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Some people from the past just show up and surprise you, that's all. But you didn't look surprised, Lily replied. You looked mad and sad. Grace's smile dropped. She sat at the table across from her daughter and tried to find a place to start, a sentence that didn't unravel everything. Lily, sometimes grown-ups have complicated history, things that hurt, things we try to leave behind. But he's not a stranger, is he? Grace hesitated. The truth pushed at her ribs like a caged thing. No, she said quietly. He's a knot. Lily didn't speak for a moment. Then, is he my dad? Grace closed her eyes. So young, but so sharp. She always knew this moment would come. She just didn't know it would come this soon. Can we talk about this later? She whispered. After dinner? Lily nodded, but her eyes didn't leave her mother's face. Grace knew that look. It was Oliver's, the same one he used in debate class when he smelled a contradiction. Her daughter was collecting data. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Grace stepped onto the porch, wrapped in a cardigan and memory. The air was cool, and her heart was colder. She pulled out her phone and stared at it, thumb hovering over Oliver's name. She hadn't saved his number, but it was burned into her screen like old scars. When she called, he picked up on the first ring. She asked, Grace said, no preamble. There was a beat of silence on his end. Then, what did you say? Not enough, not yet. She rubbed her forehead. She's starting to see it, though I can't lie to her much longer. You shouldn't have to, he said, and she deserves to know, not just the truth, but who I am, from you, before anyone else colors it. Grace's chest ached. She hated how rational he sounded, how much he sounded like the Oliver she used to love, the one who read poetry under his breath and believed in changing the world with clean energy and big, reckless dreams. She's everything, she said, voice cracking. Every decision I've made since she was born has been about protecting her. I get that, he said, but protection isn't the same as isolation. Grace stiffened. Don't you dare. I'm not blaming you, he said quickly. I'm blaming the people who took that choice from both of us. I'm trying to give her something now that she should have always had, a father, even if it's only half a piece of one. Grace went quiet. She looked up at the stars, blinking hard. You should have fought harder. I didn't know. There was a fight to be had. The silence between them was louder than any argument. Then he said, "Can we meet tomorrow? All three of us. No pressure, no labels, just a conversation, maybe at the park." Grace hesitated. She deserves better than a maybe. That's why I'm showing up, he said. When the call ended, Grace stood on the porch long after the phone went dark. Somewhere inside, Lily turned in her sleep, unaware that her world was already changing. The next day, they sat on a weathered bench at Riverview Park. Lily swung her legs, notebook in her lap, sketching her turbine. Oliver sat quietly beside her, saying nothing, just waiting. Grace watched from a nearby picnic table, her nerves fraying at every second. After a while, Lily spoke. "My mom says you used to know each other." Oliver nodded. "We did, a long time ago. We were very close." "Did you leave her?" The question was a knife to the chest. "I didn't mean to," he said gently. "I was told things that weren't true, and I believed them, but I never would have left if I had known about you." Lily didn't respond. She drew 2 blades instead of 3 on her turbine. Then after a long silence she asked, "Do you want to be in my life now?" He looked at her, eyes full. "More than anything." She studied him like an experiment, watching for deviation. Then she said, "Okay, but no lies." "None," he promised. Grace exhaled, one step, one moment, but maybe finally the right direction. Grace sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at the last message from Oliver. "Thank you for today. I know it's just the beginning." But I won't let her down. It was a simple sentence, but something about the way he'd phrased, it tugged at her. He hadn't said you or us, he'd said her. He wasn't trying to win Grace back, he was fighting for Lily, and somehow that terrified her more than any declaration of love. She had spent nearly a decade building a life where the unknowns were controlled, where love was second to safety, and where stability was a silent promise made to a little girl with her eyes and his dimple. And now that quiet stability was cracking, not with chaos, but with care. The worst kind of threat, one that offered hope. Across town, Oliver stood in front of the Grant Estate's tall, ivy-draped gates. The security guard recognized him instantly and buzzed him in, but there was hesitation in the air, as if even the estate had started to doubt its loyalty. Margaret was in the study. Always the study. She looked up as he entered, her expression a carefully constructed mask of warmth and control. "To what do I owe the pleasure, darling?" she asked, though she already knew. Oliver didn't sit. "I spoke to Grace. I met Lily. I know everything." Margaret's smile didn't waver. "And what exactly is everything, dear?" He stepped closer, dropping a thick folder on the table. Email logs, server access records, handwritten notes. Every lie, every block, every manipulation. Margaret's hand hovered over her teacup, still poised. "You were fragile. You had just lost your father. She was a distraction. A beautiful one, yes, but not equipped for our world." "She didn't need to be equipped," Oliver shot back. "She just needed to be heard, and you silenced her." Margaret finally looked at the documents. "You think dragging up the past will change the future? Do you think that girl will fit into your world now? A cafe worker with a love child?" "She's not a love child," he said, ice in his voice. "She's my daughter, and she's more intelligent and intuitive than half the board members at Grant Holdings." Margaret leaned back, sipping her tea. "And what of your future, Oliver? Your name, your legacy? You think aligning yourself with this woman and her child will be seen as noble?" "I think," he said slowly, "that if I'm not in my daughter's life, then nothing else matters." Margaret set her cup down with a soft click. "You're making a mistake." "I made one 10 years ago," he said. "You helped me make it. I won't repeat it." As he walked out, she called after him, "Don't forget, darling, you carry the Grant name. That's not a gift, it's a responsibility." He didn't turn around. Not anymore. The next morning, Grace found a small envelope tucked under her apartment door. No sender name, just her name, written in precise cursive. Inside was a single photo, a black and white image of her and Oliver from college. Her arms were wrapped around his waist, his chin rested on her shoulder. It was intimate, vulnerable, and on the back, a note in that same cursive. "Some things are better left in the past." Grace's breath caught. Her first instinct was fear, not for herself, but for Lily. She called Oliver immediately. "She knows," she said. "She's starting to move." Oliver's voice was grim. "I know. She left the same picture at my office." Grace looked down at the photo. The happiness in it felt cruel now. "She won't stop, will she?" "No," he said, "but neither will I." That night, Grace found herself standing outside Lily's bedroom door, listening to the hum of her voice reading to herself. She opened it gently. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "Can we talk?" Lily looked up, eyes wide. "Is it about him?" Grace nodded. "I should have told you sooner. I just didn't know how." Lily set her book aside, cross-legged on her bed. "It's okay. I already figured most of it out." Grace sat beside her, surprised. "You did?" Lily nodded. "He's smart like me, but he also looked sad, like he missed something big." "He did," Grace said softly. "He missed you, and he didn't even know it." Lily was quiet for a while, then she asked, "Does he love you?" The question hit hard. "I don't know," Grace answered honestly. "Maybe he did. Maybe he still does. But right now, what matters is how much he wants to be part of your life." Lily leaned her head on Grace's shoulder. "I want to know him, but only if you're okay too." And with that, Grace felt something shift inside her, not a break, but a release. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love and safety didn't have to be opposites. The envelope came 2 days later. Lily pulled it from the mailbox after school, her name scrawled elegantly in blue ink across the front. No stamp, no return address. She brought it up to the apartment, holding it like a puzzle. Grace saw it in her hand and froze. "Where did you get that?" she asked, already knowing. Lily looked up. "It was in the mailbox. It says my name." Grace took it from her slowly, her thumb trembling as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten in neat, controlled cursive. "Dear Lily, we haven't met, but I am your grandmother. I've watched from afar for many years, knowing the time might come when truth needed to find its way into your hands. I would very much like to meet you and share stories about your father, whom I raised with love and vision. You deserve to know where you come from. Should you feel ready, I will be at the Botanical Garden on Saturday at 11 I'll wait by the marble fountain." With warmth, Margaret Grant Grace read it 3 times before saying a word. Her hands were cold. Lily stared at her mother's expression, piecing together the unspoken. "That's his mom, right?" she asked. Grace nodded slowly. "Yes. She wants to meet me." "No," Grace said, more forcefully than intended. "She wants control. That's different." Lily frowned. "She's still my grandma." Grace knelt in front of her, suddenly frantic. "Sweetheart, she's not what you think. She's not warm. She's not someone you can trust." "Did she hurt you?" Grace hesitated. "Not the way you're thinking. But yes, she hurt me deeply, and if we're not careful, she'll hurt you too." Lily fell silent, trying to process something far too complex for her age, but Grace saw it in her eyes, the curiosity, the need to know, and she knew forbidding the meeting would only make her daughter want it more. Across town, Margaret, prepared for war. She stood before her vanity, adjusting a brooch that had once belonged to Oliver's grandmother. Her hair was coiled in a perfect chignon, not a single strand out of place. She believed in legacy, in family as empire, and she would not allow that empire to be dragged down by the chaos of emotional entanglements. She had always known this. Day might come, the day Oliver discovered what she had done, but she hadn't expected the girl to look so much like him, or to be so undeniably brilliant. She was a Grant. That much was clear. The question now was, could she be salvaged? On Saturday morning, Grace told Oliver about the letter. His face darkened. She didn't even speak to me first. She doesn't see you anymore, Grace said. She sees her legacy slipping away. Lily insisted on going. I have to know for myself, she said. You can come, I want you there, but I need to see her. Grace was torn, but ultimately agreed. The thought of Lily walking into that encounter alone was unbearable. They arrived at the botanical garden 10 minutes early. The marble fountain gleamed in the sunlight, surrounded by tulips and trimmed hedges. Margaret was already there, seated perfectly upright on a bench, gloved hands folded in her lap. When she saw them, she stood and smiled. The kind of smile you wear for photographs and negotiations. Lily, she said, stepping forward, you're even more beautiful than I imagined. Lily didn't smile. She looked at Grace, then at Margaret. You wrote to me. I did, Margaret said, because I wanted you to have your own choice, not just stories whispered behind closed doors. I know who you are, Lily said, and I know what you did to my mom. Margaret's eyes flicked to Grace. I see you've inherited more than your father's intelligence. Is that why you want to meet me? Lily asked. Because I'm like him? Margaret's expression shifted. I want to know you because you are part of this family, because you belong to something important, and I would never let that be taken from you. Belonging isn't something you decide, Grace cut in. It's something you earn. Margaret ignored her, turning back to Lily. You deserve the best. Education, opportunity, connections, things your mother couldn't provide. Lily's shoulders squared. My mom gave me everything I needed, including the guts to see through people who smile when they lie. The words landed with a silence that echoed between them. Margaret's mask didn't crack, but her fingers curled slightly, betraying tension. I see, she said coolly. You're not ready. I'm more ready than you think, Lily replied. Margaret stepped back. When the dust settles, I'll be here. Whether you believe it or not, I care about your future. As she turned and walked away, Grace exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Lily slid her hand into hers. I didn't need to hear anything else, the girl said softly. I already knew who my family was. Back at home, Oliver listened in stunned silence. Then he smiled, pride and sorrow mingling behind his eyes. She's stronger than both of us, he whispered. Grace nodded. She had to be. It started with a knock on the cafe door just after closing. Grace was wiping down the counter when Joe, the evening shift barista, called from the front. Grace, there's someone here asking for you. Says he's from Oklahoma. Grace's heart skipped. Oklahoma. That part of her life had been boxed up, labeled before everything, and shelved deep in memory. She walked toward the entrance slowly, each step reluctant. When she turned the corner, the past stood there, smiling like it never left. Hey, Gracie. Her breath caught. Jake? Jake Walker, her high school boyfriend. The boy she'd left behind when she went to college. The boy who had sent letters she never responded to. The boy who once said, if you ever call me, I'll come running, no matter what. She hadn't called, but apparently he'd come anyway. What are you doing here? She asked, still stunned. He gave her a sheepish grin, pushing his hands into his coat pockets. I was passing through for work. I saw your name on a school newsletter online. You're kind of local famous, you know. Single mum who started over. I had to see if it was really you." She stepped outside, arms folded against the cold. "That was a long time ago." "I know," he said. "But I never forgot you." Grace exhaled slowly. "You can't just show up like this. Things are complicated." "Yeah," he said, glancing toward the cafe window. "I heard you've got a kid." She stiffened. "Her name's Lily." "Looks like she's got your hair," Jake said. Then, softer, "and his eyes." The silence between them thickened. "I was around," he added. "After you left, people talked. I figured something had happened. Then I heard about the Grants, that you had history with them." Grace turned sharply. "Whatever you came here for, it's not going to work. My life is different now." Jake nodded. "I can see that, but I also see you're standing on a cliff again, and I thought maybe you could use a rope this time." She was about to snap, but something in his voice stopped her. It wasn't possessive, it wasn't pitying, it was familiar. Old echoes. Ghosts. Later that night, Grace told Oliver. "He showed up," she said, pacing the living room. "Jake, out of nowhere." Oliver's jaw tightened. "What did he want?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "To check in, to remind me of who I used to be, maybe to stir the pot." "Did he say anything about Lily?" Grace hesitated. "He knows she's not his, but he brought up the Grant name, said people used to talk." Oliver's expression shifted, and not jealousy, but a deeper discomfort. "She's a child, not a town story." "I know," Grace replied. "I've worked 10 years to make sure she wasn't." "Then why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to understand something," she said, stopping in front of him. "My life didn't pause when you disappeared. It kept going. I made choices. Some good, some bad. But I don't want ghosts from either of our pasts creeping into Lily's world and making her question where she belongs." Oliver sat back, quiet for a moment. "Is that what you're afraid of? That she'll see him and wonder what life could have been?" "No," Grace said. "I'm afraid you will." That stunned him. The next morning, Lily caught wind of the tension. She was too perceptive, too quick. She walked into the kitchen while Grace stared blankly at her coffee. "Did something happen with him?" she asked. Grace blinked. "With who?" "Oliver, you're both being weird again." Grace forced a smile. "It's complicated." "You keep saying that." "Because it is," she said, exasperated. "Sometimes adults don't know how to move forward without dragging the past behind them." "Then maybe stop dragging," Lily said simply. Later that day, a car was parked across the street from the cafe. Jake's car, watching, waiting, and on the same day a letter arrived at Oliver's office. This one not from Margaret, but anonymous. Inside, a photo of Grace and Jake from years ago, with a note scribbled in blocky letters. "Are you sure? She's telling you everything?" Oliver stared at it for a long time. The doubt wasn't loud, but it was there now, whispering, and that was all it needed. Oliver stared at the photo for longer than he meant to. Grace and Jake, arms around each other, laughing like they didn't know the world could break. It was old, sure, but something about the way she leaned into him. It didn't feel like a footnote. It felt like a chapter. He knew better than to let an anonymous note stir him, but it had been delivered directly to his office, hand-delivered, not mailed. That meant someone wanted him to feel it. Someone wanted him off balance, and it was working. He left the photo in the drawer, but it didn't stay there. It followed him, into meetings, into his home, into the silence he shared with Grace on the phone that night. She could hear it in his voice, the edge, the withdrawal. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Just busy." She paused. "That's not the kind of lie you're good at." He didn't respond, and that said more than any answer. Across the city, Grace sat alone in her living room, the walls closing in. She hadn't heard from Jake again, but the memory of his visit lingered like smoke. She hated that Oliver was pulling back, hated that just as she'd begun to trust again, everything felt like sand slipping through her fingers. When Lily came home from school that afternoon, she found Grace sitting on the kitchen floor, the cupboards open, groceries half put away. "You okay?" she asked. Grace nodded too quickly. "Just tired." Lily crouched beside her. You don't look tired. You look, sad." Grace smiled faintly. "How do you know the difference?" "Because I'm your kid," she said, "and I'm not stupid." That night, Oliver stopped by without warning. Grace opened the door in a sweatshirt and slippers, surprised to see him standing there with his hands in his pockets, like a boy unsure if he was welcome. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted before she could speak. "I thought I was doing this right, showing up, being patient, but now I don't know if I'm being played." Grace stepped back. "What are you talking about?" He pulled the photo from his coat and handed it to her. "Someone dropped this at my office." She stared at it, the laughter, the closeness, the past she'd never planned to revisit. This was a lifetime ago. "Then why didn't you tell me he came back?" Oliver asked. "Because I didn't think it mattered." "It does," he said, and then softer, "It does to me." Grace sat down on the arm of the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't ask him to come. I didn't invite it. I told him to leave, but if you think I owe you every broken piece of my past, then you're not here for Lily. You're here to own something." Oliver exhaled. "That's not fair." "No," she said. "It's honest." The silence between them widened. Lily, listening from the hallway, felt it too. That adult kind of silence, the kind that didn't end with answers, but with someone leaving. When Oliver finally spoke, his voice was ragged. I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of wanting this so badly and not knowing if I'm enough," he said. "For her, for you, for any of it." Grace walked closer, her voice soft. "I'm scared too, because I've lived a whole life built around not wanting. It was safer that way." They stood there on opposite ends of the same truth. "I don't want to lose this," he said finally. "Then stop running from it," she replied, but the words weren't enough to fix it. Not tonight. When he left, Grace didn't stop him. She just stood at the window, watching the taillights disappear into the dark, and wondered how many more times her heart could survive opening its door, only to have it walked out of again. Lily noticed the change before either of them admitted it. Oliver didn't show up for science club that week. He didn't text her about her turbine mock-up or ask how her quiz went. And Grace had started overcooking dinner, something she only did when her mind was somewhere else. The house felt quieter, not peaceful, hollow. Lily didn't say anything at first. She just watched, listened, waited. Then, 3 days after Oliver left without a goodbye, she asked her mother a question that had nothing to do with homework. "Did you love him back then?" she asked, voice calm, measured, like a scientist setting up an experiment. Grace looked up from her laptop, startled. "Who?" "You know who." Grace blinked, then sighed, closing the lid slowly. "Yes," she said. "I did." Lily nodded like that was a data point she'd expected. "Do you still?" Grace hesitated. "That's more complicated." "But you do," Lily said. Not a question, a conclusion. Grace didn't argue. "I'm scared too." Lily folded her arms. "That's not fair. You tell me not to let fear stop me. You say courage is doing it anyway." Grace let out a laugh, not from humor, but from disbelief. "I hate how smart you are sometimes." "You're the one who raised me," Lily said. "If that's a problem, it's your fault. That night, Lily wrote Oliver a message, not from her mom's phone, from her tablet. "Hi, it's Lily. I don't know what's going on, but Mom's sad and pretending she's not. I think you are too. Do grown-ups always quit things when they get hard? Because that's not what you said before." She didn't tell her mother, just sent it, then waited. Oliver saw the message in the middle of a conference call. The words hit harder than any quarterly earnings report. He left the meeting without excuse, walked out into the cold air, and sat in his car for 30 minutes, rereading it. He thought about the night he walked away, the moment he let silence win over explanation, the image of Lily, focused and curious, asking him, "Do you want to be in my life?" Rang louder now than it had the first time. He picked up his phone. "You're right," he wrote. "No, we don't always quit, not when it's something worth fighting for. Tell your mom I'm coming over if she'll let me." Lily read the message in bed under the covers, grinning to herself before turning off the screen. The knock on the door came just after 8 p.m. Grace opened it, expecting Joe or a neighbor. Instead, it was him. Rain on his coat, apology in his eyes. "I didn't handle it well," he said. "No," she replied, "you didn't." "But I'm here now." Grace stepped aside just enough. "You want coffee?" He nodded. "If it comes with a side of truth." They sat at the kitchen table, both looking exhausted. The rain tapped softly against the windows. "You thought I was hiding something," she said. "I let my fear speak louder than my trust," he admitted. "And I hurt you. Again." Grace didn't speak, just sipped her mug. "I know we're not perfect," he said, "but I want this. I want you. I want her. And I'll keep showing up until that means something again." Grace looked at him, raw and quiet. "Do you know how hard it is to believe someone after they leave twice?" "I do now." Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Not heavy, not hostile, just full. Lily crept from her room, pretending to be thirsty. She stopped, at the doorway, catching them mid-conversation, their voices low, their bodies leaning just slightly closer than they were before. Grace turned, caught her in the act. "Water's in the fridge." Lily smiled. "Thanks, just checking." And she was. The next morning, Oliver was still there, on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, half asleep but smiling when Grace brought him coffee. "Truce?" he asked. "Maybe," she said, "if you don't burn the eggs again." The article broke at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. Grace's phone buzzed non-stop on the cafe counter. Customers murmured. A local gossip blog had published a headline that spread like fire. "Heiress denied, illegitimate daughter of Grant Empire discovered in East Nashville cafe." Beneath it, a photo of Grace, and one of Lily, pulled from a school website, cropped but unmistakable. Grace stared at the screen, her heart collapsing in her chest. Oliver called within minutes. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to you I didn't authorize anything." Grace's voice shook. "You think I care about permission right now? Lily's face is everywhere." Across the room, Joe turned up the TV, the same headline. This time with a voiceover. "Sources close to the Grant family suggest the patriarch's only heir may be facing a quiet paternity battle with a local woman who once vanished from social circles nearly a decade ago." Grace felt like the air had turned to ash. At school, Lily heard the whispers. She saw the looks. Even the teachers were quieter, as if they weren't sure how to treat her. One girl said, "Your dad's rich, right? Like mansion rich?" Another added, "Why didn't he want you before?" Lily walked out of lunch and didn't stop until she was home, breath ragged. Grace met her at the door, ready to comfort. But Lily wasn't crying. She was angry. "You said you were protecting me," she snapped. "But you didn't protect me from this." Grace knelt. "I didn't know it would happen, sweetheart. I never wanted..." You didn't tell me everything. You said I'd understand when I was older, but now the whole world knows before I do. Oliver arrived minutes later, his face drawn, his phone still buzzing with board member calls and reporters. He tried to speak to Lily, but she walked past him without a glance. "She's hurt," Grace said. "Not just from the news, from the silence we both kept." Oliver looked lost. "I thought we were doing the right thing, taking it slow." "She's not a story," Grace snapped. "She's a person, and we let her be defined by strangers before we let her define herself." That night, Margaret called. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny it. "It was inevitable," she said calmly. "Better to control the narrative than let someone else do it first." "You dragged a child into a media circus," Oliver hissed. "She's not just a child," Margaret replied. "She's a grant, and she will be treated as such, like it or not." "I will make sure you never come near her again," he said. Margaret's voice turned cold. "Be careful, Oliver. Don't forget who built your world, and who can tear it down." The next day, Jake showed up at the cafe again, this time not smiling. "I saw the article," he said. "You okay?" Grace nodded tightly. "We'll handle it." Jake looked past her toward the back office where Lily sat drawing in silence. "You sure she will?" Grace blocked his view. "Don't." "I meant what I said the other night," Jake added. "I still care if things go south with Oliver again." "I'm not yours to rescue," Grace interrupted. "I never was." That night, Lily asked to sleep in her mom's bed, not from fear, but from needing something familiar. "I don't care about being rich," she whispered. "I just want things to feel normal again." Grace wrapped an arm around her. "Me too." In the morning, a letter arrived at their door, legal, formal, sealed with the Grant family insignia. Oliver read it at the counter, expression hardening with each line. "What is it?" Grace asked. He looked up, jaw set. "My mother is filing a petition for shared guardianship of Lily," he said. "She wants legal leverage." Grace staggered back like she'd been punched. "She wants to own our daughter," she said. "No," Oliver said. "She wants to win, and she doesn't care who she destroys to do it." Oliver stood before the towering courthouse steps, the skyline behind him, cameras in front of him, and Lily's future in the balance. He adjusted his tie, not to impress, but to armor up. Today wasn't about litigation. It was about protection, about telling the world that the narrative they'd tried to steal from Lily would be reclaimed. Loud, clear, and on her terms. Grace watched from the bottom of the stairs, fingers tight around Lily's. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. Oliver turned, eyes calm but burning. "We don't get to be quiet anymore, not when silence got us here." The press conference began with murmurs. Then cameras clicked. Then came the statement. "My name is Oliver Grant," he said, voice steady. "And for the record, this isn't a scandal. It's a story about what love looks like when it's failed and fought for and finally found again." Gasps, flashes. Reporters leaned forward. He continued, "10 years ago, I lost the woman I loved, not by choice, but by deception. I was led to believe she walked away, that she didn't want to be part of my future. I found out recently that wasn't true. She tried. She was blocked. She was silenced by people who claimed to be protecting me. A beat in the time. Since she raised our daughter alone, she gave her brilliance, kindness, and strength. And now, those same forces that once erased them are trying to do it again, publicly, legally, strategically." He looked down at Lily, standing beside Grace, then back up. "This is my daughter. Her name is Lily Delaney Grant, and I will protect her with everything I have, not because she's an heir, but because she's mine." Grace's eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not now. Not with all of Nashville watching. When the conference ended, Oliver turned to them. "You okay?" he asked. Lily nodded slowly. "You were kinda cool, actually." Grace let out a broken, Laugh. Kinda, Oliver grinned. Tough crowd. But the moment of levity cracked as a figure stepped from the crowd. Not Margaret, but one of her lawyers, envelope in hand. Grace recognized it instantly. "Subpoena," she said, taking it. Oliver's smile vanished. "Court hearing. Petition for guardianship moving forward." Back at home, the weight settled in. "This is going to get ugly," Grace said. "They'll dig into my past, into yours, into Lily's." Oliver nodded. "Then let's give them the truth first." He proposed a video interview with a journalist he trusted, a long-form piece, their words, their story, not the twisted version. Grace hesitated. "Are you sure you want that out there? Forever?" "I want her to hear it one day, and know we fought." She agreed. The interview aired 2 nights later. Grace spoke first, not about Oliver, but about single motherhood, about nights of fever and fear, about finding joy in small victories, about learning that strength didn't always look loud. Then Oliver spoke, about grief, about silence, about waking up to the life he should have been part of and choosing not to run from it. Lily wasn't in the video, but her drawings lined the background of Grace's home, and her voice could be heard laughing faintly in the distance. The internet exploded. Comments flooded in, some vicious, most supportive. Margaret issued a public denial, a family matter made unnecessarily public. But the damage was done. Public sentiment shifted. For once, the Grant name wasn't controlling the narrative. It was answering to it. The next morning, Oliver's firm called. "Some clients are pulling back," his partner said. "There's backlash, personal matters bleeding into professional ones." Oliver didn't flinch. "Then we're better off without them." Later that day, Grace stood before a family court judge, not because she was summoned, but because she filed her own petition, full custody with protected visitation, not to shut Oliver out, but to shut Margaret out forever. Oliver supported her. "You don't have to," she said. "I want to," he replied. "Because if I had to choose between my daughter and the Empire, I'll choose her every time." That night, Lily asked the hardest question of all. "Do you think she'll stop?" Grace looked at Oliver, then back at Lily. "No," she said softly, "but we're not afraid of her anymore." Oliver took Lily's hand. "And we've got something she'll never understand." "What?" "A family that fights for each other, not against." The courtroom was colder than expected, not in temperature, in atmosphere, in energy. Oliver sat beside Grace, both of them wearing the armor of people too exhausted to pretend anymore. Their hands were inches apart on the table, not touching but not drifting either. Across the aisle, Margaret Grant sat with her legal team, impeccably dressed, impossibly composed, unmoved. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp glasses and a sharper gaze, called the hearing to order. "Petitioner Margaret Grant," she began, "has requested limited guardianship rights over minor Lily Delaney Grant. Respondents Grace Delaney and Oliver Grant are present to contest." The room buzzed with quiet murmurs. Media were not permitted. Inside, but the buzz outside was deafening. Nashville watched this case as if it were theater, but to the 3 people at the center of it, it was anything but. Margaret's lawyer opened with rehearsed elegance. "My client is deeply concerned about the environment in which her granddaughter is being raised. There is a question of moral and educational integrity, as well as the reputational damage to the Grant name if the child is not provided a stable, guided legacy." Oliver's jaw clenched. Grace reached under the table and, for the first time, grabbed his hand. Then Grace took the stand. She didn't cry. She didn't snap. She spoke. "I've raised Lily alone for 9 years, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I was told the father of my child abandoned me, that I didn't belong in his world, that I wasn't worthy of his name, his future, or his love. And I still raised her, with kindness, with curiosity, and with the tools to see through people who lie in beautiful tones. Margaret didn't blink. Grace looked directly at the judge. My daughter doesn't need power. She needs peace. And the person threatening that peace is sitting right there. Then Oliver stood. He walked to the center, paused, and met the judge's eyes. Your Honor, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for protection, not for me, for my child, because for 10 years I lived under a false narrative created by a woman who raised me to believe control was love. I believed her. I let her. Silence the only person who ever told me the truth. He turned to Margaret. I forgive you, he said, but I don't trust you. And I won't let you rewrite my daughter's story to fit a legacy built on manipulation. Margaret finally rose. She didn't falter. I only ever wanted the best for him, she said. And now I want the best for her. That's not a crime. The judge leaned forward. But is it your decision to define what best means for someone else's child? Silence. The judge called for a recess. And in the hallway, everything unraveled. Lily stood by the vending machine, waiting. She looked up at Oliver and asked the one question he hadn't prepared for. Will she ever stop trying to own us? Oliver knelt. I don't know. But she's not winning, right? He smiled. Not if we stand together. Grace stood beside them, and Lily stepped into the space between. A complete picture. A family not built on blood or law, but choice. When the hearing resumed, the judge's ruling came swiftly. Guardianship. Petition denied. Furthermore, the court recommends a permanent restraining order be explored against Ms. Margaret Grant should future harassment or interference be substantiated. Margaret said nothing, just stood, nodded curtly, and exited with her team like royalty in exile. The courtroom emptied slowly, but something had shifted, not just in legality, in them. Outside, the cold air hit like relief. Grace turned to Oliver. We did it, she said. He looked at Lily, then back at her. No, she did it. Lily grinned. Does this mean I get 2 Christmases? Oliver laughed. We'll negotiate. It started with paint samples. Grace stood in the middle of the sunlit living room of the house Oliver had quietly bought. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, a real house. 2 stories, wrap-around porch, creaky floors, a backyard overrun with weeds and possibilities. He handed her a color swatch. I was thinking something soft. For the kitchen, he said. Warm tones, something that feels like morning. Grace stared at him for a long beat. You're nesting. I'm evolving, he replied. They both smiled. The house wasn't his alone. He had made that clear. It was theirs if they wanted it. Built not to impress, but to hold laughter, arguments, birthdays, apologies. And for the first time in years, Grace didn't feel the need to keep her bags half-packed in her mind. Lily moved in like it was always meant to be. Her books filled the shelves. Her science kits overtook the garage, and her bedroom was painted a bold, defiant turquoise. This color makes me feel like I know who I am, she said. Oliver nodded. That's the only design rule I'll enforce. If it feels like you, keep it. Dinner was loud, messy, full of interruptions and mismatched plates. Grace burned. The garlic bread. Oliver spilled lemonade. Lily laughed until she choked. It was perfect. That night, as Lily brushed her teeth, she asked Oliver, Do you ever wish you could go back? Fix everything? He thought about it. No, he said, because we ended up here, and I wouldn't trade this now for a perfect then. Lily smiled, foam around her lips. That's a good answer. Grace heard it from the hallway, hand over her heart. They still had work ahead. Therapy appointments, school meetings, financial entanglements, the ghost of Margaret still lurking in social circles with her carefully crafted version of events. But inside that home, there was no space for ghosts. only breath. One evening, Grace stood in the garden, watching Lily set up a wind turbine she'd built with Oliver. It was small, functional, spinning slowly in the light breeze. "It's not just decoration," Lily explained. "It powers the lights on the back porch." Grace blinked. "You wired it?" "Dad helped," she said, "but I designed it." Grace's throat tightened. "It's beautiful." Later that night, as they sat on the porch under that very light, Oliver handed Grace a small envelope. "I wasn't sure if now was the time." She opened it carefully. Inside, a photo of them from college. The original, not the one Margaret used. This one showed them mid-laugh, mid-motion, blurry but alive. Behind it was a note, written in Oliver's handwriting. "For every day I missed, I promise not to miss another. You were never my mistake. You were always my beginning." Grace didn't cry, but she held the photo like something sacred. "I love you," he said, soft but certain. "I know," she whispered, "and I believe you." They didn't kiss like movie stars. They didn't declare the future. They just sat, side by side, hands intertwined. And when Lily joined them, curling into the blanket between them, Grace whispered, This is what home feels like." Oliver looked at her. "No, this is what family feels like." And for the first time in 10 years, there were no caveats, no conditions, no shadows, just air, just truth, just a house that breathed. The box arrived on a Tuesday. Ordinary cardboard. No return address. Just Oliver's name written in black marker, smudged slightly by rain. He found it on the porch after work, tucked beneath the mail slot. He almost didn't open it. Inside were files, old ones, property deeds, letters, legal briefs, all from the Grant estate. At the very bottom, in a faded blue envelope, was Grace's name. Oliver recognized the handwriting instantly. It was hers, his mother's. He hesitated, then handed it to Grace when she came home. She turned it over slowly. Her fingers shook. "It's dated 2014, she said. "A year after Lily was born." Lily watched from the doorway, sensing something delicate. Grace opened it. The paper inside was aged, the ink soft. "Grace, if you're reading this, it means time has passed. Maybe enough to hear me. Really hear me. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I will give you the truth I kept from my son, not because you need it, but because he might. I loved him, fiercely, terribly, and I was terrified you'd take him away from me. You see, my husband, he was everything to Oliver, and when he died, I watched my son fracture. I couldn't lose him too. So when you came, bright, real, unscripted, I saw everything I feared, a life he might choose that didn't include me. So I made it hard. I lied. I paid. I erased, and I regret it more than anything I've ever done. If he ever finds his way back to you, please know it was always because of you, not despite you. Tell him I tried to protect him. I just didn't know how." Margaret, the silence afterward was thick. Oliver took the letter and sat with it for a long time, then folded it carefully, almost gently, and placed it back into the envelope. "She was wrong," he said, "but she was human." Grace nodded, eyes glassy. "She feared losing you, so she lost both of us." Lily stepped forward. "Are you mad?" Oliver pulled her into his lap. "I was, for a long time. But I think maybe now I'm just done carrying it." That weekend, they drove out of town. No destination, just the road, the wind, and a picnic. Lily insisted on planning herself. They found a hilltop outside Franklin, spread out a blanket, and sat beneath a canopy of old oaks. Lily ran in circles, chasing wind with her arms wide like wings. Grace watched her and leaned into Oliver's shoulder. Do you ever think about the life we almost had? She asked. He smiled. Sometimes. And I think this one's better. Later, as dusk settled, Lily curled between them, sun-kissed and sleepy. The air smelled like honeysuckle and earth. I'm glad I know everything, she said, eyes half closed, even the sad parts. Grace kissed her forehead. Me too. Oliver whispered, because the sad parts got us here. And with that, the story finally stopped spinning, not because it ended, but because it had arrived home. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.